Hello everyone. Today we will discuss about statements and indentation in Python. So when it comes to statements, the first question a person might have is what is a statement? Statement is any set of instructions given to Python, or statement is simply put, statement is a code that can be executed in Python. So there are different types of statements that are possible. The main types are one is called as a multi-line statement and a single line statement. So now let's see examples of a multi-line statement in Python. So I'll switch on to the Jupyter notebook for to task. So I'll create a new notebook. Now for this multi-line statement, I'll create a new variable. Let's call it A1. Let's say I want to add the first five numbers, and I'm going to just use the plus operator for this. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. Let's say this is my variable. I've written this entire thing in one line, but I can as well write it in multiple lines. So let's say if I want to write 1 plus 2 in one line, and I press enter and I write this other half in the second part. So if I try to run this particular code, Python is going to throw me an error because Python is not able to understand this piece. To make Python understand that this is one continuous statement, we have to actually explicitly give this continuation command, that is nothing but the backslash. So if I run this code after I have added this backslash command, you can see now there's no error, and if I print out A1, I get the value of 15, which is the sum of first five numbers. This was explicitly asking Python to look at the continuation for this particular code. Now what if we want Python to figure out automatically that we have some code which is continuing? So we don't have to explicitly give out a line continuation command, but we want Python to figure out that there is some kind of continuation that is going to happen. To do that, we can actually create, let's say I'm going to create this variable v1, and keep it the exact same thing. So I'm going to add in the first five numbers again. So here I'll simply, and now what I'll do is instead of simply writing out the numbers, I'll start this code using the brackets. So if I write 1 plus 2 plus, and now in the next line I write 3 plus 4 plus 5. Now you can observe that here we did not put any kind of continuation command on the line continuation code. But if I run b1 now, we are going to see there is no error. This is because when we have put the braces, this is, this is telling Python that there is some code which is going to complete when this particular braces are closing. So Python will automatically look into the next line. That means this particular code that we have mentioned, this line continuation code, the black slash which we made, that is already present over here. Okay, so this was about the multi-line methods. What happens if we want to declare more than two or three variables, but I want to do it in one single line? So that can also be possible. To do that, what we have to do is we have to use semicolons. So let's say I want to create new variables. So let's say C, D, and E. Let's say I want the value of C to be 5, D to be 6, and E to be 7. If I write all these three things and I just put a comma, we are going to get an error saying that there is a syntax error, can't assign to literal. But what if I want to do this entire thing but in a single line? So instead of commas, what we have to do is, so I'm just going to copy paste this entire thing again, the next line, and here instead of commas I'm going to put in the semicolons. Okay. Now that we have put the semicolons, if we run this code, now there will not be any kind of error. And let's say if you want to cross check, let's print out the value of D. D, now we see the number 6 is stored in the variable D. So this is how we can actually do a single and multiple line in Python. Now, coming to the next piece, that is, after statements, let's look at indentation. So when we talk about indentation, indentation is basically the space that is used for defining certain tasks. Now, for people who have already done some kind of coding in other languages, we know that we use indentation to make our codes more readable. That is, we leave out extra spaces so that the code looks neat, and if there is some kind of explanation that we want to do, we obviously take the help of indentation. But when it comes to Python, indentation has a very different meaning in Python. So you have to be very careful when you're using white spaces in Python, because in Python, when we use indentation, we are basically telling Python that this particular set is a set of code, different set of codes that we're writing in Python. So in Python, indentation, there's a start and there's an end, which is telling Python that, let's say if I write five code lines in a certain indentation, that that means I'm telling Python that these five set of codes that I've written go together as a block. So indentation plays a very important role in Python, so that we are telling clearly to the interpreter that this set of codes are together. Now, generally we see that either white spaces or the tab is used for indentation in Python. Now, sometimes some people put three or four white spaces instead of using the tab button. So that's a personal preference that you can have, whether you want to take three or four white spaces or press the tab button for indentation. Now let's see a small example as to how indentation is carried out in Python. Okay, let's say that we take the numbers from 1 to 10 and we want to print those numbers out. And let's do that using a for loop. So for doing that, we can simply say for I in I'm going to use the range function here, and inside the range function, let's say I just want to start from 1 and I want to end at 10. So I have to mention the value as 11 here because 11 will not be considered. So you can see after the colon, when I press enter, Python automatically is giving me one space gap. So this indentation automatically happens whenever we are writing loops. So here we can say, since we want to print out these numbers, I can say simply print I. So if we run this, you can see that the number from 1 to 10 have been printed out. So this happens when we're writing a loop, and because we have put a semicolon, there are certain rules which are already pre-built into Python. So whenever we write a colon, that is we're telling that we have a loop coming in, automatically Python gives us this indentation. Now let's say what happens if somebody does not follow the indentation. So let's do that and see what happens. So I'm going to copy the exact code again and I'm going to paste it. Okay, and this time what I'll do is I'll just remove the indentation. So I'm just deleting that white space and I'll try to run this code. Now you can see what is happening. We get an indentation error. That is, Python is clearly telling us that it is expecting a block. This was a loop. This was a for loop, and Python was expecting the value after an indentation. So something like a tab. Okay, so I just press tab and this indentation was there. And when we ran this, we get the similar output that we saw in the previous cell. But as soon as you remove this particular indentation, let's say you're in a hurry and you have pressed backspace or you have just typed it out like that, you automatically get an indentation error. That means Python is clearly telling you that there is an error that has happened in the code. Now, the other way of writing this entire piece of code. So let's say if I want to write this for loop in one single line, I can also do that. So for that, what I'll do is after this particular colon, I will not press enter, but I'll simply write print I. So when we run this, we get the same output. But when you write the code like this, sometimes it is not very clear. Now, since we are only printing out I, this might be very clear that this is the range of numbers that we want and we are printing out the number. But let's say you're doing some kind of complex calculation. Then writing down the entire complex thing over here using semicolons like the one we did here, passing three numbers simultaneously, that can look very untidy and sometimes it can confuse the person who is actually going through the code. So it's always good practice to maintain the indentation and keep your code very simple and neat and clean. And if you just simply follow eh, the indentation that is pre-built into Python. So for example, when we just press enter, automatically this indentation comes in. So if you just follow along the indentation which Python is actually throwing out, you can keep your codes extremely neat and clean, and it is always good to look at consistent coding style. Okay, so this is what is about the indentation of Python, and thank you very much.